Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone from the good life. How are you doing? My name is Matt Merkan, and welcome to the first podcast of MSA Tilburg. Before introducing the guest and explaining what the goal of this podcast is, let me first tell you in short what MSA Tilburg is all about. Well, MSA stands for Muslim Student Association, and we are affiliated with Tilburg University. Our goal is educating and empowering Muslim students of today to be citizens of tomorrow's world. This can be achieved in three different ways. The first one is creating unity. What we find of utmost importance is that we can create bonds and that we can network at the university on campus. Therefore, we have, for example, the weekly lessons or some social events. Well, yeah, now due to Corona, it's a bit difficult to have social events, but hopefully, inshallah, we will continue with this after Corona. The second one is giving a voice for the Muslim student. And this can be achieved, for example, during the weekly lessons. We find it important that everyone can share his or her knowledge and or opinions with everyone. Therefore, we can broaden our horizon and understand each other much more. And the third one is that we should keep in mind that Islamic and academic identity are inseparable. What I mean with this is, for example, when you're young, you're going to the mosque, you learn that from the lecturer that, for example, how to pray 5 times a day, what is halal, what is haram, etc. But what we find important, what we think is also important that people neglect, is discussing, talking about Islam on an academic level. So yeah, that's in short what MSA Tilburg is all about. Today, we're going to talk about the difficulties we face during the holy month of Ramadan. More specifically about the nutrition, sleep, and exercise during this month. And therefore, we have invited a guest named Maarten van Elst. He is also known as MuslimFit. Maarten van Elst converted to Islam in 2011 and finished his bachelor degree in nurse anesthetist. Afterwards, he followed a program in vitality coaching, and in 2015, he started his own company called MuslimFit. Maarten, salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining. Welcome. How are you doing, bro? How are you doing, my beloved brother?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing fine. In the light of the Corona crisis, so alhamdulillah, it could be much worse. So alhamdulillah, I'm doing fine. Of course, a bit bummed out that the gyms are closed and we cannot do the stuff we want, but alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I exactly have the same. Like yesterday, I went training my own personal room, and on a given moment, you're tired of it. You just want to go to the gym, just want to go to see some other people as well in order to be motivated. So I also have the same struggle. Maarten, can you tell me in short what MuslimFit is all about? Like you started this company in 2015. I think so. At the moment, you were studying as well, right?
Yeah. I started my company as a side business during my studies.
Yeah.
More of a passion project, but especially during my internships and when I was finishing my degree, I noticed that the side hustle had a bit more motivation for than the actual degree that I got. So I just decided to leave the hospital and pursue this. Yeah, what I do, it did change a lot during the years. A bit about my background, like you said, I have a medical background. I was an anesthesia nurse. But besides that, before I was Muslim, I was also a competitive bodybuilder. Always had a passion for nutrition, training, and self-development also. So basically, my passion for sports, self-development, psychology, and the medical field all came together in this project. And the aim was really, especially after I converted, was to help Muslims and people in general to really fulfill their life's purpose. And for that, you need sufficient mental, physical, social, and spiritual health. It started off really as more as Muslim fitness, really heavily focused on strength training and such. But throughout the years, especially when I learned more, I noticed that at first, physical health isn't the only thing that matters.
True.
And secondly, it's just a very small part of the puzzle. So at the moment, I'm, like you said, I did a fatality course post bachelor degree, and yeah, that's really focused on the bigger picture. So a bit of life coaching, a bit of performance coaching, and a bit of health coaching. So a very integral biopsychosocial spiritual look at life.
Mashallah, man. Like, you didn't follow the traditional way. Like, what I mean with that, what many people do at the moment they start studying is, okay, studying, maybe having a side job, not starting a side hustle, graduating, and then working for a company for a long period of time. But you didn't do it. Like, did you have this vision from a young age, or was it just a development you had throughout the years?
Well, I would not say I'm a born entrepreneur, because that means that I would be a very good in doing business. Because I'm a very good coach, but the business side really has to be developed.
Or like thinking outside the box, I mean.
Yeah, well, I was always quite undertaking. I did a lot of things. Even, for example, when a good story is how I got my first bodybuilding coach. I was 16 and I was 17, and I just wanted to get big, and I just went to the national championships of bodybuilding, and the guy on the heaviest weight class who won, I forgot, he's the biggest guy. In that time I thought, okay, he's the biggest, so he probably knows the most. I just walked up to him after the competition and said, can you coach me? And it's a bit undertaking, just going out of my comfort zone and asking people of knowledge is a bit of what I did during my life.
Or just taking initiative, just like go with the flow and just do it.
Yeah,
exactly. I'd like to start with the first topic, that is nutrition, and I'd like to start with a sunnah from Sunan Ibn Majah, Book of Food, Hadith 3349, and it goes as follows. Maybe you know it as well. The son of Adam cannot fill a vessel worse than his stomach, as it is enough for him to take a few bites to straighten his back. If he cannot do it, then he may fill it with a third of his food, a third of his drink, and a third of his breath. So actually, it is highly recommended to fill your stomach with a third of food, a third of drinks, and a third of air. Like, do you know the sunnah?
Yeah, and I think what's very important to note, the advice that the Prophet gave us wasn't to fill our stomachs one third, one third, one third. What he said and what he advises us is that we need very little food. But if we cannot withhold ourselves and we need to fill ourselves, then the maximum, it's not the recommended dose, it's the maximum. So
and we're not following the maximum, we're doing above that.
Yeah. So that's a big part of how we should look at health and Islam, and we really strayed far away from the Sunnah. And what we of course have to acknowledge is that there are different levels of a Muslim, and there are different levels of worship, and everybody has his own flaws, and it's not only about ego, like self-discipline. Self-restraint, of course, has a very big individual component of it. But as more and more science shows, and there are also hadith about this, that the social environment plays a big role. So, yeah, on one side, we really need to ponder on these revelation and these sayings of the Prophet ﷺ and these wisdoms. On the other side, we shouldn't forget the complexity of human behavior, and especially in the times we live now, because currently the modernity and all their opportunities, but also the obstacles and the challenges and the shahwa, the temptations it brings with it, subhanAllah, it's very different than all the centuries before. And man changed very little, but the times changed a lot. So that brings some unique obstacles with it. So yes, we really need to, it is a reality check, but secondly, we also have to be realistic and have a gradual build to what's optimal from an Islamic point of view. So basically, keeping it real, not being too enthusiastic. So I first have to say how I'm going to answer these questions. First of all, I'm not a scholar. Mm-hmm. I'm not an imam, and I wouldn't even class myself as a student of knowledge. So although I've read a lot, I'm not going to give any Islamic advice. The advice that I'm giving is from my own experience concerning fasting, and mostly based on scientific evidence. So that's a big pointer. And what I was also find interesting maybe to answer that there are no cookie cutter one size fits all advices, especially for these kinds of things. So if I'm going to answer it, I want to do it basically in 3 parts, or mainly 2. Looking at, we are talking to an MSA. I want to give some advice for athletes or people that train a lot and find their the sports results and gains, they appreciate a lot and will maintain them. And also for students, because somebody who trains a lot and has to maintain weight or strength or endurance is a bit different than somebody who just wants to study and feel good. So there's a few disclaimers and pointers in how I'm going to answer these questions.
So I'd like to start with the first question is with nutrition. What I have, for example, and I think many others as well, at the moment the iftar starts, so you didn't eat for like 15 to 17 hours, then you see the iftar, and many people are like, they have the temptation to eat a lot, and that at that moment you're also not following the sunnah, but you're also like harming your body as well. You eat a lot of food, and then you eat a lot of food as well during sahur. Like, what would you recommend for these people? Because you're actually doing 2 things. First one, not following the sunnah, but actually also harming your own body, because it is not like healthy to eat a lot of food after a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's harmful or unhealthy. I'm not sure about that. Never really delved into that. But it truly isn't helpful, and you will certainly notice some downsides of it. So good question. Like I said, we first have to look at, bring a bit of context to the situation. So do you want me to start for athletes or for normal students, normal people? What would you prefer to answer first?
I would say normal people at first.
Okay. So, yes, I think a big part for both groups is, if you're talking, how can I resist that urge to eat a lot? Is first think about your motivation. So I always ask my clients to bring back the sunnah of saying Bismillah, and not because I hope everybody tries to say Bismillah before they eat, but think about the deeper meaning of Bismillah. You're saying in the name of Allah. So basically what we've been taught is that everything that you do, you're sleeping, exercise, making fun, studying, worshipping, everything can be an act of worship, but the intention has to be right.
True.
So when we say Bismillah, we say in the name of Allah. So we intend to make this opportunity to eat and nourish ourselves, to make it an act of worship. So a good reflection of you, and especially during Ramadan, because it's a spiritual month, is to think about, I say Bismillah, I saying it's an act of worship. Is this way that I'm eating and the amount that I tend to eat, is this actually for Allah? Can I call this an ibadah? And what I see is when you ponder over this before you actually start to eat, your akal takes over from your nafs, from you. So your cognition, your rationality, and you're trying to be virtuous takes over for your desires, because you've been reflected. This is an act of worship. So that's part one. Think about, why am I eating? What's the motivation behind it? Can I comfortably say that it's worship when I'm stuffing myself with to fill and with all kinds of junk food and such? Not saying necessarily it's haram to or necessarily bad to eat junk food during Ramadan, because it's I'm not so extreme that you also have to always eat flavorless rice with chicken or something. But
we all have that.
We need to take care of our health, and not only our health, because our health is such a vague thing. But that's the second part of, if we're looking at motivation. So I'm doing this for Allah. I do it as a worship. So it has to be within the bounds of what is halal and tayyib.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first one. Secondly, we can broaden this motivation and make this intention even deeper by looking, what do I want to achieve with this feeding opportunity, with this meal? So we can look, okay, what we want. Of course, we want to feel good during the day. When we're fasting, we have the energy to do our work, our worship and such. But what we also want to do is, inshallah, pray Qiyamul Layl, Tahajjud, all the nightly prayers, Tarawih, if inshallah the mosque is open again. Of course, you can also pray Tarawih at home.
Mhm.
But what I think everybody knows, if you have a very, very big meal at Maghrib, you go to the mosque for Tarawih, you really get that sluggish, lazy, tired feeling.
Yeah, the laziness feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, you really get the laziness. So you can deepen the motivation by think, okay, of course I want to eat, I want to feel, I also want to um, comply to my necessary worldly desires and needs for nutrition. But I want to do it for Allah, so it has to be within the bounds of what is permissible and what is virtuous. And secondly, I don't want it to harm any of my activities later in the day. Yeah. So if you look at practical, what should I eat? Um, what I always advise my clients to eat products that are easily digestible, because you will notice that a lot of people have difficulties eating again at suhoor because they're still full because of the iftar.
Mhm.
So and what comes down to is try to not ingest too much fats. That can be healthy fats, but also unhealthy fats. So try to stay away of fat, red meats, oils, butter. To just take it easy, because we know that fat slows down the digestion of your food and makes you feel full longer. So that's very interesting for suhoor, and we'll come after that. But at iftar, we want to keep the meal light. So you can eat some meat, but for example, take chicken or white fish, stuff with, or very lean beef. Even beef is not, even beef without the fat is a bit hard to digest. So take stuff, and most people know by themselves what's light. Basically, if you eat something and you get hungry soon, it's often easy on the stomach. That's something I would recommend. Also, not ingesting too much fiber at fibrous foods. So, for example, eating nuts would also contain fats, but a lot of greens. It sounds a bit intuitive, but of course, vegetables are nice. And for
Mhm.
example, if you want to lose weight, it can be necessary. Or,
Mhm.
but if you're somebody who really has struggled, who loses, for example, loses a lot of weight, and he or she doesn't want to lose that weight,
Mhm.
and you have a lot of troubles eating again at sahur, then it might be beneficial to wait with the fiber, so the fruits and vegetables and the fat for suhoor, and take an easy meal. So there's some carbs, white rice, bread, potatoes, or doesn't really matter. But basically a meal that's easy on the stomach. That would be my advice, basically for everybody who has iftars, just to make sure that you're not being apprehended later in the night if you want to do some worship at home or in the mosque, and also that you're not still that you can't eat at suhoor.
Like when you were talking, I was just thinking about a video I saw, I think last year during the Ramadan, and I think many people can relate to this, me as well. In that video, they explain like two different people during the holy month of Ramadan. The first one is the person who was eating a lot, and then like he's filling his stomach like fully to the extreme. And the second one is someone who is like just eating a little bit, as you said, not too much, but also not too many, just enough. And then the first one is just laying down because, as you said, the laziness takes over. And the second one goes to the mosque, is praying tarawih, etc. And the first person who ate a lot is like laziness is taken over the whole day and night, like also doing sahur. But the other person is like actually worshiping to Allah, and that's what many people neglect. And I totally agree with you because what I had as well is, for example, during iftar, I in the past I ate a lot of food, and then on a given moment you're just not feeling well, like because your body needs to digest a lot of food in a short amount of time. And then the next Ramadan, I did it the other way, like eating a little bit. I felt that my body's also like feeling much better. You can worship Allah as well much better. Like it's not only fasting for 17 hours, then you can eat whatever you want. Like there's more thoughtful thought inside that. Like for example, in the holy month of Ramadan, of course, fast. but also like go to Tarawih, gain knowledge about Islam, gain some new insights, talk with other people about it. It's just not only okay fasting for 17 hours, eating a lot of food, and then it's done. Like that's not the purpose of the Ramadan, and many people neglect it. And I'm happy to hear from you the same as well. Um, then I would love to go on to the second question. You made an introduction to that, but like the goes and the no goes. Um, did you have any, like, I wouldn't say bad experience, but like something that you did in the past which you regretted, like, okay, if I didn't do this it would have been much easier for me, like a total no-go for you?
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, when I just converted, I was still really emotionally attached to my physique and bodybuilding, and I was really still bodybuilder even when I stopped competing. So I remember that Ramadan really, my first Ramadan really was a big concern for me, because I was really afraid, because I didn't have any experience. I just turned Muslim, and I was really scared I was about to lose a lot of my hard work that I did the previous years. So what I remember is that I really stuffed myself during the night, and it was really a battle. The biggest difficulty was not the fasting, but the enormous amount of food that I tried to eat during the during the night. Yeah, so that's something I really don't recommend for anybody to do, because at first it is really important to, like you said, is Ramadan is about faith and spirituality and working against your nafs. And I think a very good reflection for everybody is that if you're thinking about Ramadan and Ramadan approaches, and the first thing you feel is worry and anxiety about your your sports related goals, then there's a problem with your intentions and with your nafs, because it's very permissible to have a hobby. Of course, you worked hard for it, so you don't want to lose anything unnecessarily. But if your biggest worry is your physique or your endurance, or then you really have to ponder about, okay, why am I fasting? Why am I Muslim? Why am I doing this? It's all for the sake of Allah. And looking good and having fun with exercise is perfectly permissible and fun, but we have to realize that being jacked and big or being able to run a marathon is not going to get you into heaven. So, and secondly, what's also very important, if we touch a little bit about exercise, is that there's been a lot of research, very good research, very heavily funded research on sport performance during Ramadan. Why? A few years back, we had an Olympics during the holy month of Ramadan. And of course, there are a lot of big budget sports clubs that have Muslim athletes that want to fast during game season. So there's been a lot of research on amateur and on professional athletes during Ramadan. And the funny thing is that if you take in line some guidelines, you basically don't suffer that much. And we really overestimate the negative effect that Ramadan has on our performance at home, but also professional life, but also at our sportive life. So I think that was the biggest surprise when I looked at the literature on this, is that if you looked at all the studies that were very heavily controlled, so they took blood samples and temperature and urine samples. Basically, they took everything. And of course, strict good performance testing. And also some subjective measures. It was really interesting that you saw that if they tested, for example, a group of athletes, their performance didn't really suffer that much, maybe a little bit. But when you look more closely, is that at first that most athletes had the feeling that they did worse because they didn't show them the results. They just let them do the test, and they didn't. Sorry?
The placebo effect.
Now the other one, the nocebo effect, because they thought Ramadan was going to negatively influence their performance.
Yeah.
And you saw that people who, before fasting, when they were interviewed and they really thought that Ramadan was going to affect me negatively, they also saw during fasting that they experienced it harder, and that their results were less, if they were less. And it was also really funny that most athletes said, yeah, during Ramadan I cannot function on my best. And when they did the test, I go, I think I did worse. And then they looked at the results and like, you did exactly the same as before Ramadan. So I think we really have to watch out for the big nocebo effect. So placebo effect means that because you think something positive is going to happen,
Oh, is it
actually,
okay?
it's the opposite. So nocebo is because you are biased that you think you're going to perform less or something bad is going to happen. You actually mentally perform worse. For example, you push yourself less hard, and that's all unconscious. It's not consciously people think, okay, I'm holding back, but it's just because you think you are holding yourself. And it's very interesting if you look at the science, you can even see physiological effects of these mindsets. So first, if you look at the literature, also in students and in athletes, if you take care of your nutrition, if you eat healthy, try to be a bit smart with your sleep, you can perform basically fine. You can do fine. The Prophet ﷺ, our precious pious predecessors, they waged war, they crossed deserts during fasting. So I think we here in the Netherlands can survive without food, without any heavy physical labor. So I think that's a big takeaway, is to basically chill and don't worry so much, because if you are smart, you can perform perfectly. It might feel a bit harder, but just know that it's possible.
Okay, but then on the nutrition part, for example, many people say that during the month they lose weight, but they're like, okay, I partly understand that because you're eating only like maybe 2 or 3 times in like 7 hours. But then I'm also like, okay, if I eat a lot of food in order to maintain weight, I'm making very difficult for myself. So I don't know which direction I need to follow, because as you said, okay, during this month, just accept the fact that you will have difficulties. But also on the other hand, I'm like, okay, I like to maintain, for example, my weight as well. I don't want to gain a lot of weight. I don't want to lose a lot of weight. So how can I balance that?
Yeah, good question. That's really specific for athletes, because the funny thing, if I look at my clients or just observations when I speak to people, but also at science, at observational studies, we see there's also a very big part of the Muslim community that gains weight during Ramadan. So, but if we look at, okay, we want to maintain weight or not lose too much weight. Very good question. Well, the first thing is be real to yourself. How much am I going to lose? Because it's very possible that you just lose some water weight because you get a little bit dehydrated because it's summer and such. So if it's like 1 or 2 kilos, okay, if that's your normal weight loss, don't bother much about it. Just accept it. Don't push yourself to just not lose anything.
Yeah.
But we also see that some people really, really lose a lot of weight. And then basically the advice stays the same, what I just said. But basically just increase the amount. So for example, what I did when I first started bodybuilding, I just kept up my normal diet. I ate a lot of red meat and such. And like I said, red meat can be a bit hard to digest. So when I, after iftar, ate a very big and heavy meal with a lot of fats, fiber, and basically what's considered a healthy meal, because it was just steak with brown rice and vegetables, but it was fat and a lot of fiber. I got really full. So it was really difficult for me to eat another large meal at iftar. And it was really force feeding almost. But the funny thing is, you can eat almost the same amount of calories, but if you distribute the contents of your meal differently, it gets more easier to get more calories. So for example, what I did when I didn't want to force feed myself and didn't want to have a negative effect on my worship, but still want to maintain weight, what I normally do is, and this is really for sports, so not so much for normal people. During the Ramadan, I eat very little vegetables. Why? Because I normally eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit and such, but they do contain a lot of fiber, so they take a long time to digest. So at iftar, I don't consume any, not much fiber. I just keep it on easy digestible carb sources, so mostly white rice or white pasta, and just some protein source, a lean protein source like chicken or so. And I don't add anything else, basically, just some spices or something. But Why? Because I want a meal that's high in carbs and protein and calories, of course,
Mhm.
but it doesn't fill me or make me sluggish. Then after iftar, I changed it around. I try to consume more fat because fat per gram contains more calories.
Mhm.
And also, it keeps your satiety up for longer. So that's also interesting for people, just for normal people, because we didn't talk about suhoor yet for normal people. But basically, it's the other way around during suhoor, at Fajr, so the morning meal.
Yeah.
Instead of easy digestible meals, we want meals that stick around for longer and keep our satiety up for higher. So that means we increase the fiber and we increase the fat content.
Soak
So
into
then
the
we can,
food.
for example, eat eggs, whole eggs, um, use some butter, use some oils, nuts, red meat, fatty fish like salmon and avocado, those kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so that's downside. The upside is you get more easy calories because fats contain more calories than protein
Mhm.
and carb sources. And the also bonus is that it gives you energy for longer and your satiety keeps up. So basically, you do the exact opposite of what you did with
Yeah.
iftar. And if you do it like this, so each digestible carbs and protein during iftar and with during iftar
Yeah.
and at sahur fats and also of course protein again and more fiber. So then you can possibly add your greens and your vegetables. You will notice that you can get in more calories
Yeah.
without feeling too full, too fill, or sluggish.
Actually, it's very logical what you're saying because if you're eating at iftar, like fats, red meat, etc., you're full for like till sahur, and then in
Yeah,
total you didn't like eat that much of food. But if you do it the opposite way, you're eating like beforehand, maybe not that much calories, but like in total you eat enough to maintain your weight. Like this counts actually for everyone, not only the sport athlete, but like seriously for everyone. Like
yeah,
um, you don't lose a lot of weight, you don't gain a lot of weight, but just the approach, the formula, you just need to change that. That's actually what you're saying, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
But it's also possible, for example, I also, besides my strength work, I also do some endurance work, like road cycling. Um, and it's more advanced, and I would not recommend it to anybody unless you really um, need a lot of calories. You can also add in some easy liquid calories. So, for example,
Yeah.
ground rice, ground oats, or even dextrose, that's basically sugar. Or even take a shake and, for example, with sahur, put a little bit of olive oil in your shake just for some added calories. Those are quite advanced tactics if you really need a lot of calories. If you're a big guy, for example, I don't think the average sports fan really needs that, but it's also possible.
Okay. And what about the drinks? As you said, like you gave an introduction as well. You can make shakes for yourself. But like I also understand the fact, for example, with me, it happens that when I didn't eat for a long period, eat and drink for a long period of time, I like to drink, for example, something unhealthy. Of course, I also drink my water to stay hydrated, but I also like to drink, for example, cola or anything else, or frizzy, I don't know, Sprite. Like, what do you recommend about that?
Um, yeah, personally, I don't really have that need for fizz drinks, or so it's easy for me. I just like water. I always have, even as a child. So
For the general people, like
yeah,
from a general point of view,
I'll keep it to a minimum, basically. Like
minimum.
I said, you have to pick your battles.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look. Okay, where am I coming from? How are my current dietary habits? What we know from just common sense, but also from science, is the more drastic the change, the harder it is to maintain. So if you, for example, if your diet is really really crap
Mm-hmm.
normally and you eat too much to your fill, I would prefer that you just look at your meal qualities, your solid meals, your actual food, um, and just keep the drinks in a minimum. But it's okay to have a few or a little bit, like one can or something. Um,
Well,
Second, but if, for example, if your diet is already okay, it might be considerable to drop it. But like I said, my personal opinion is that people are too obsessed with minute details. For example, I'm not against zero drinks or artificial sweeteners, and I know there's a lot of fuss about it, but yeah, a lot of people mistrust science. But if I look at the general literature, like things like aspartame in small amounts are perfectly fine. So if that means that you can maintain a more healthy diet, for example, maybe have less crappy food, and to compensate you have like a cola zero just to give your nerves also something, and that means that you get less calories in, lose weight, and increase your health. I'm really not against fizz drinks and such. So I know a lot of people, especially in our community, might disagree, but I'm not too worried about um, fizz drinks and such. So of course, preferably not. But if that means that if you try to cut out fizz drinks and then some way half the way down Ramadan you give up because you can't take it anymore, I just prefer to keep drinking some fast drink and just improve your general diet. Yeah.
Like what I've also noticed that with me, and I think it also happens with a lot of people, don't drink, for example, cola, like you said, fizz drinks at the moment of iftar, because what I have when I drink cola and also my normal big meal, okay, in the past big meal, I noticed that because of drinking cola, my stomach is like full immediately. I don't want to eat like that meal, which is actually what I actually need to eat. So and then as a result, in total, you didn't eat a lot because you were drinking cola because you had that desire. So as you said, I would minimize it. And what I recommend as well is drinking your cola, or I don't know what else, your fizz drinks after iftar. For example, just when you're laying on the couch and just want to drink something, because then you also stay hydrated because you're drinking water as well. But you also, like as you said, you have desires. You would also like to, yeah, like you fasted for 17, 18 hours and you just want to surprise yourself.
Yeah, but there's also another thing to be said is that, for example, Imam Ghazali in his Ihya Ulumuddin make a reference about this. Is that like Imam Ghazali is a very tough guy if we look at how he looks at food and nutrition and disciplining the self. But sometimes, not sometimes, always, he has some very practical wisdoms in his books. Because, for example, he writes that if you have a meal and there's one thing that you really desire, he says, start with that food first. Because if you do something, if you don't eat that first, you will fill yourself, for example, to the 1/3. But because your desire is so high for that food, you will eat it anyways. So basically what Imam Ghazali says, it's probably not what he meant, but it's a takeaway, is that basically he says, eat your dessert first.
Yeah.
But it is somehow, it's totally not what he meant, because their nutrition was a lot better, and he wrote this for scholars and not for the lay people. But the wisdom still stands, because everybody knows, if you've been to a restaurant and you've filled yourself up till the brink, and the waiter comes, do you want some ice cream? The answer is always, I can make some room. So
the opposite, man.
Like, yeah, is it okay?
Yeah, like what I have, for example, when I have the desire to eat unhealthy, I'm just like to myself, okay, man, just have a normal meal, and after eating that meal, I don't have the desire to eat something unhealthy. Okay, but maybe that's just me.
yeah, of course, everybody's different.
Yeah,
but
yeah. True.
For example, I know for myself, I have a sweet tooth. I know that it's very hard for me to contain myself. That's the easiest way I try use restraint is not. I don't use my restraint and my discipline to not eat sweets. I use my restraint and discipline when I do my shopping, because I know if I bring ice home with me, that box of ice cream is going to get get lost somewhere. It's going to disappear. So it's an everybody knows themselves better than I do now, vaguely giving advice. But it's the thing to take away. If you, for example, have something that you really desire, for example, your partner made or yourself bought something sweet, of course, it's not the healthy way. But if you look at the bigger picture, okay, maybe if I start with a can of cola, it maybe makes me eat less. But it's maybe better than fill myself up to the brink and then be lazy at night. So that's something you have to reflect on yourself. Okay. So of course, preferably not, because pop drinks, they don't really add anything to your. It's not very beneficial. It's really a nostalgia thing. But I'm also not as scared for artificial sweeteners or those kind of things. Okay, so it's up to the people.
So the key takeaways of this topic, nutrition, is if you have desires for sweetness or, for example, cola, just do it from the very beginning, but just minimize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what type of food can we best consume? Just do it the other way around. For example, during sahur, eat red meat, oil, butter, etc. In order to keep full, to be full for the rest of the day. And at the very beginning, don't eat a large amount of meals, but just separate it throughout the night. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
So basically, do the opposite what most people do
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Because at iftar, it's a huge feast, and
Yeah,
at
exactly.
sahur we eat a sandwich. I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
your spirituality will have much more benefit if you switch it around. Have a sandwich at iftar, and then have your bigger meal at sahur.
Okay, interesting. Then I would like to go on to the second part, exercising. Like what I noticed is if I didn't eat for a long period of time, of course, you don't have your carbs in, you're low in energy. And then what people do is exercising before iftar, just before iftar. Like, for example, I did that, but for me, it doesn't work. Maybe it works for other people. But then you can also like exercise after iftar. What would you recommend? Like, how did you experience that? Were you also having difficulties with that, with the exercising part? Or exercising could be like going to the gym. Well, in this case, going to the gym is a bit difficult, but like training for yourself, it could also be like running or just having a walk. Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah. Well, at first, what's very important is that you stay active.
Exactly.
Because, subhanAllah, if you look at research, like we know, we spoke about losing weight, but there's a big part of our community that actually Ramadan makes them less healthy.
Yeah.
And that's really disturbing because fasting in general, an energy deficit, you will lose some weight. You should see all kind of improvements in blood markers and blood sugar and those kind of stuff. But we see from literature, we actually see it like a big part of our community somehow lets themselves go so much and they stop moving that they actually gain weight and get less healthy. So that's quite worrying. So for general population, it is important to stay moving. Also for your perceived activity, for perceived energy levels.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds very counterintuitive, but not moving makes you feel lethargic and low in energy, low in motivation. So even when you're not an athlete, just keep walking around and don't become physically lazy because it will have a turnover to your mental capacity and also your spiritual capacity. So especially for students, for example, if you become physically lazy, it will negatively influence your cognitive capacity. So for learning, memorizing, and recalling during exams. So that's very interesting to know. Secondly, if we look at athletes and maintaining sport-specific function and maybe physical appearance, it's good to know about how fast sports performance and, for example, muscle mass decreases. People are often too, especially if you look at muscle mass and strength, people are often too worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a lot of studies, even in high-level bodybuilders and professional American football players. Those guys are really big tanks, you know. This is from, for example, a very good study with American football players, and like their average squat, a 3 rep max was 150 kilos. The average bench press was like 120 kilos. So those guys were very strong.
Mm-hmm.
And for like a period of 2-3 months in their game season, they just did one gym session a week, and they almost maintained all their strength and mass. So even for advanced athletes, to maintain your sport performance doesn't really take so much of training volume and intensity. And to keep it safe, most literature says that you can really halve your training volume and perfectly maintain all your sport performance, especially just for 4 weeks, because 4 weeks is not so long.
Yeah.
Because if you don't train at all, we often see we only see sport decrease and muscle mass decrease and strength only after 3 weeks of not training. So basically, if you don't train at all, you only have like 1 week of decline. So what I used to do and what I do now, I try to maintain my training, and that's a bit tough because, like I previously said, you don't necessarily have a decrease in performance, and that's still true. But what we do see that everybody notes that the perceived effort is higher, so it feels more heavy. So most of these studies were done in professional athletes, and it's their job and their sole purpose to work out. So their motivation is really high. But for students or people who just like strength training, even when they really really love it and really attached to it, it might be a bit hard. So what I advise to my most clients, just cut down on training. Like for example, if you train 4 times a week, cut it down to 2 times a week. If you train 3 times a week, you can easily tone it down to one a week, one training session a week, and you're perfectly fine. And it's also very interesting. You said, okay, what's the best time to train? That doesn't really matter a lot either, because we have studies done for people who train in the morning and then fast the entire day. We have people done working out at the evening before iftar and after. The difficult thing is most of the studies weren't done in Western Europe, so the fasting windows were a bit shorter. So what we see in the literature is that training in an unfasted state is a little bit more beneficial. It's a little bit better. That's very tiny. But the other consideration is that, for example, I've seen studies from Malaysia and such, they quit fasting at 6 o'clock. So when they train, it's like their normal time, 8 p.m. or something. So for us in the Netherlands, we fast a lot longer this time of year. I don't know if it still is better because it's so late in the evening. And we also know that tiredness increases your risk of injury and also decreases your performance. So basically, it doesn't matter. There's a slight benefit, maybe, I don't know if it goes up for us, to train an unfasted state. But personally, I prefer to do it in the evening before I break my fast. So while I'm in the fasted state. Yeah. I've done it a few times during the day. I felt that the exercise itself felt easier because I had more energy. But the downside was I noticed that I got hungry a bit more during the day. So that's why I don't do it during the day. But I know people who do it during the day and they're fine. And like I said, you don't have to worry too much about dehydration or losing muscle because you don't eat in your anabolic window. That's nonsense. And you don't, especially when you do it for a month, it doesn't really matter. But personally, I prefer to do it before iftar, and also because after iftar, I want to focus more on worship and I want to make myself ready to go to the mosque, inshallah, if they open again this year. So for practical reasons, I prefer to do it somewhere before Maghrib.
So what you're actually recommending is it depends on the person. Like maybe one person likes to train in the morning, maybe the other one just during the day. Maybe one person after iftar, the other one before iftar. You just need to listen to your body and see what's best for you.
Yeah, and don't worry too much, because basically what a lot of science has shown, if you just continue working out, even when you just do 30 to 50%, you won't lose anything. You probably won't improve, but that's not necessary because it's Ramadan. You get 11 months to improve. Take this one like a deload or something. So even when your nutrition is suboptimal, your sleep is suboptimal, your nutrition, your hydration is suboptimal, if you just continue doing a little bit of intense work, you won't decrease, and so you don't have to worry that much.
Okay, so actually for the athletes, for someone who exercises a lot, you recommend just to decrease your volume. For example, instead of training 5 times a week, train 3 times a week. Because at
or
the
even
end,
2.
Maybe even 2. Because at the end of the month, your performance hasn't decreased at all. Maybe a bit. Yeah. So, but that's like doable. And for the person who doesn't exercise, you suggest to keep being active. For example, you just have a walk, but don't stay in your bed sleeping, laziness, etc. Because I think that's also the reason why many people gain a lot of weight. Because if you can't eat anything, your energy level is very low, and then you just want to sleep. I also know many people, I also had it myself, during the day you're just sleeping a lot more, but before the Ramadan you didn't do anything, like you didn't sleep at all. But because your energy level is low, you just like, I don't have anything to do, I don't have the power to do my daily tasks, so I will do it, for example, after iftar. But just try to do it, know your capabilities. The human being is capable, like it's much higher, the capabilities of that specific person is much higher than you know. So try to stick to your daily activities, and after iftar try to worship Allah and gain knowledge about your deen, for example. Interesting. And what about, for example, realistic goals? Like, for example, what many people do is, okay, the month of Ramadan has started, I want to I want to start exercising, or maybe they just say, okay, I want to improve myself in my deed, but then they ask too many of themselves. For example, okay, for someone who doesn't pray 5 times a day, for example, he says, okay, I'm going to pray 5 times a day, but then after 10 days, he's like, yeah, it's getting way too difficult, I'm stopping. So what would you advise? What would you suggest for those people? It's
Yeah,
like aiming too high,
yeah,
and
of course.
maybe they can do it for like 1 or 2 weeks, but afterwards they're like, nah, it doesn't work for me, I'm quitting.
What I always advise my clients is to make a Ramadan schedule, program, or goals during some of the first nafila or voluntary fasts. Because what has been scientifically proven is when we when we plan, when we set goals, most people are too optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
And what we do also know is that when you make when we ask people to set goals when they're tired, when they're exhausted, or when they are put in a lot of work, they are more realistic, or even maybe even a little bit pessimistic. So what I find, it's a win-win scenario, because I always advise people to prepare for Ramadan, not only spiritually but also physically. And I think it's very interesting to delve into that at the last part of this when we talk about sleep, because that's the biggest impact of your performance often. But what I advise my clients, start fasting, even if it's 1 day a week before Ramadan starts, so your body can use to it. But also when you start doing these voluntary fasts, especially during your first day, because the first day is always the hardest, before Maghrib, then go make your Ramadan goals, because then you know how you feel. And inshallah, because most people know it, in the first weeks of Ramadan always are the hardest. And what we see it's really funny, we see it in student school results. If we look at the literature, we see it in sport results. We see a dip in performance in the first 2 weeks of Ramadan, and then a return to normal in the third and fourth week. That's basically just your body and your mind, your spirituality, getting used to the sudden change in lifestyle.
Exactly.
But so if you do a voluntary fast, it's the hardest. You feel tired. If you then make your goals, you will probably be less. You won't be optimistic, because you know, okay, well, this is pretty hard. If this is going to be the first week, I maybe have to reschedule a bit. So I think that's a very practical advice to make a realistic plan. And just in general, Ramadan is a month to be ambitious. It's not a month of stability, of balance. Basically, it's a month where we are unbalanced, but the balance tips in the favor of the spiritual.
Exactly.
So we leave out some of the worldly, but normally Islam is all about balance, and then we have to take care of our body, but we also have to take care of our spiritual heart. But during the month of Ramadan, the emphasis is on spirituality. So you have to be ambitious, but also be realistic. So basically know that if you don't prepare, and most of us don't, we just have to be realistic, just fasting itself might be a big change for a lot of people.
But are you then saying, like, normally Islam's all about balance, and during the holy month of Ramadan, we're like, our lifestyle is in disbalance, it is unbalanced. But then I think, like, okay, try to find the actually balance within the imbalance.
Yeah, true.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, basically a new balance.
Yeah, exactly. Basically a new balance, so you can level up for yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually.
A lot of more meant that unbalance is not so much that Ramadan is not bad for you.
Yeah.
Like a lot of atheists think, but Ramadan is perfectly safe unless you have some underlying illness that makes it impossible for you to fast. But Ramadan is actually pretty good for you. You know, if you have a healthy lifestyle, if you fill yourself with sugar and fats and junk food all night, it might not be the best. But if you act normally, not even be a health nut, but just do normally, Ramadan is healthy. But what I meant with unbalanced is simply, as a Muslim, we cannot fast the entire year. It's forbidden.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant with unbalanced. Not that it's bad or negative, but just it's something, and that's why we have to be ambitious. Allah told us we have to be focused on this right now, and more than during normal months.
What I mean with unbalance is the change in lifestyle, because at that moment, at the start of Ramadan, you will surely have difficulties.
Yeah.
And that's actually the point where you're, I wouldn't say at your weakest, because that's not the nice pronunciation, like the perfect example. But what I mean with when you hit your lowest point, you're open for the greatest change.
Yeah.
Like at the month of Ramadan, you're having difficulty. You need to change your lifestyle. You need to wake up you can't eat for 17 hours. You start iftar at 9 or 10 o'clock, and then you start praying tarawih, maybe some tahajjud, and then you start doing sahur. But the normal daily activities keep on going. You still need to wake up at 8 or 9 o'clock. You can't like sleep till 1 p.m. In the afternoon. The daily activities still go on. So you will have more difficulties with actually trying to find yourself within that month to better yourself, to go level up.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like I did.
And the interesting thing is what we can delve in next, is basically when we humans make big lifestyle changes, it affects us, and it impacts our ability to perform. And so what I meant with, for most people who don't prepare, just the act of going to Ramadan mode is already a big change. It's really a pity, because if you just at least at the minimum take 2 weeks before Ramadan to prepare, you make yourself you make it so much easier, and then your goals can be much more ambitious. Because like I said, we see it back in all the literature, and we also noted ourselves. The first 2 weeks we feel more sluggish, we do less, and then the third, fourth week we improve. Of course, there's barakah in the last 10 days of Ramadan, but it's also it's basically just your body getting used to it. And that's a shame, because it has to do very little with spirituality. It's just because we're too lazy to do it a bit more. We're just too lazy to do it before Ramadan. So if you really want to set high goals and be ambitious and do more than just fast and have to take up the full 2 weeks of the first of Ramadan to get up to speed, just take at least 2 weeks before Ramadan to get in the Ramadan mode, like I like to say.
Like you also need to accept yourself. For example, before the Ramadan, for example, you're at level 1, and during the Ramadan, the change of lifestyles, for example, level 10. And making it that maybe that works for some people, but I think for the majority that doesn't work, and that's the reason why you need to prepare for it. It's the same with a marathon. For a general person, running for a whole marathon is very difficult. You need to have a preparation for that. But many people neglect the fact that you also need to do that in your spiritual activity. Interesting. Like what you said, many people are lazy to do that, but that's actually the key to find balance. True, interesting. Okay, and then with sleep, what you say is the first 2 weeks your body need to adjust to the change, and then the third and fourth week your performance is the same. But what I have, and I also think many other people have that, during the last days of Ramadan, where we actually need to do better, because the last 10 days maybe Laylatul Qadr will take place in a certain night. So you need to pray more. But at the same time, my body is getting exhausted because of the change of lifestyle. And in a given moment, your body's like, okay, we need to go back to normal. What would you suggest for those people?
Well, sleep is especially here in the West, where we in the summer we have difficult fasting hours. It's of course we don't have the extreme heat like in the desert, but sleep deprivation really takes a toll on you. So basically, there happens in the West for us, there are two things happening. Secondly, firstly we have just a lack of sleep.
Yeah.
Because especially if you work full time and you go to pray tarawih in the mosque, you miss out on some hours of sleep. So that's difficult. That takes a toll. It's possible, it's not unhealthy, but it does negatively improve your performance. Mm-hmm. But secondly, and more interestingly, is what we also have is basically just a jet lag. Because all of a sudden, we switch our entire sleeping schedule around. Yeah. So maybe we go to bed normally at 11, 12 o'clock, and now it's the moment we start our day. And I know a lot of people, and I when I'm possible, I also like to do it, just stay up all night till Fajr and then go to bed.
Yeah.
Especially in the midsummer months where the hours are so small, you can maybe sleep for 2 hours. What we see is we have jet lag and sleep deprivation. That's a bad combination. And that's why I say is that the adaptation and preparing for this month is so important, especially during the summer. I think the spiritual preparation is also really important, but fasting in the summer, you need some physical preparation.
Exactly.
And I think if you fast in the winter, it won't have to be necessary at all physically. Of course, spiritual is still possible, and we still need to bring up our motivation and such. But how can we improve? We know from studies on jet lag that it takes around again 10 to 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks to adjust to a jet lag.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this mean? Is if you want to don't have the biggest drop in our performance in the first week of Ramadan, we just have to. What I was advised is, because when we start Ramadan, we haven't prepared. All of a sudden, our sleeping schedule changes. We stop eating and we don't have caffeine and coffee anymore.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. So I always say maybe we get headaches and stuff and all what, because we need a few physical adjustments in the first week. So I always tell my clients it's better to have these headaches and being tired before Ramadan, because then you can still maybe take an aspirin if it really bugs you and you have to work, or you can drink some coffee to counteract the lazy, the lethargic and the tiredness. So what I always advise people, you can do it in 2 ways. Or you can drastically go to Ramadan mode. So basically stay up at night and sleep at different times of the day 2 weeks before. So that means that your body is basically used to the changed sleeping rhythm. What's more optimal, what I always try to do, and I'm going to start it within like 2 weeks, gradually working towards it. So, for example, every week I go to bed an hour earlier and I wake up an hour earlier before Fajr, and I ease into it. So it's a little bit easier for your body. It's easier. It's basically a lazy way to do it. You make it yourself easy, because now when I feel tired, I can just drink some coffee and I get a boost. And I can slowly, and 10 days before Ramadan, I quit drinking coffee. And when my headache gets too bad for the caffeine withdrawal, I can just take an aspirin because I'm not fasting. So that's why the preparation physically in the summer months is really important. So that's basically preparation. What I just 2 weeks at least before Ramadan, try to stay up at night till the hours that you are preparing to stay up at night during Ramadan. And let your body get used to it, whilst you can still eat and drink to make it easy.
Okay.
Then secondly, we still have sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
And we can have some sleep deprivation, and you will see decreases in mood and motivation and cognitive function and physical performance. So we can just accept it for a month. That's possible. But what's also very beneficial, and I always advise my clients to do, is to incorporate napping. Basically sleeping a day. And it is difficult, especially for people who work full-time and, for example, have a family and have kids. But you have to make up those hours somewhere else. And sleep deprivation really builds up. So that's possible why a lot of people, in general, we see that performance returns to normal in the 3rd and 4th week. But people that really suffer from sleep deprivation will notice, because the deprivation builds, because every day you miss out an hour, it stacks. So you might feel an increased tiredness and being worn down during the months. For those people, taking naps is really important. There are different ways you can do naps. You have different sleep cycles. And we know that if you wake up in a deep sleep state, you will feel pretty bad and lethargic and tired. I think everybody have had it once, that they are tired and they go lay on the couch and they fall asleep, and then they wake up and they feel even more tired, even when they slept for an hour. That's because you woke up during a deep sleeping state. So you can do 2 things. You can either make sure you don't go into a deep state of sleeping, and then I will advise to shorten the nap to 20, max 30 minutes. Depends how long you take to fall asleep. If it takes a few minutes, just put 30 minutes. Because there's a big chance that after those 30 minutes, you will go in a lower deep states, and that might be possible that when you wake up, you feel lethargic. The other thing is that you can just finish the sleeping cycle, because if you go to a deep state, you go back again. So during a night, it's like a wave in and out. You don't wake up, but you have different stages of sleep that repeat each other. And then it's best to sleep for like 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That one cycle to complete takes about 90 minutes, right? Like
Yeah,
what you said.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So if it's possible, try to sleep for 90 minutes. If you cannot sleep for like at least 60 minutes, then it's even better to just shorten it to 30 minutes, because then you feel less lethargic if you wake up.
Like, yeah,
yeah.
Go on. I just want to say, so just take a power nap for like 30 minutes, or just sleep for the whole cycle, which takes about 90 minutes. Because many people think, okay, I want to sleep for 1 hour, but at that moment you're in a deep state, in deep sleep, and that will negatively influence your performance. So instead of many people thinking like, oh, I've had 1 hour full of sleep, so I can continue working, it's actually better for yourself to sleep for or 90 minutes or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And I think we also shouldn't feel, because a lot of people feel guilty for sleeping during the day in Ramadan, but especially when you really notice that you need to sleep. I think like 1.5 hours of sleep during the day is pretty long, so people might feel bad about it, but I think you really shouldn't, because for example, if you don't, you will probably just wait till you can break your fast, and then you have energy again, and you will do less during the night. So it's not you're being lazy, but you missed out on hours of sleep during the night. So just taking 90 minutes of sleep during the day wouldn't be like something to be shameful about, if that means you can be more productive during the nightly hours. So
you think in the long term, actually.
Yeah.
So
not even that long, just on a daily basis. But you just have to have that realization.
No, what I mean is, for example, for someone who sleeps in the afternoon and who feels guilty, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Think on the long term. Maybe after 10 days of having sleep deprivation, you're like, okay, I just give up. But you can also instead you can just sleep in the afternoon for 30 or 90 minutes, and then on the long term you have benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very true. And secondly, what's also important to know is that your body really likes a routine, and especially your sleeping routine. So we see that, like I said, just even when you still get your 8 hours of sleep, if all of a sudden you stay up at night and you sleep during the day, you will see that your body doesn't like it, because your body doesn't like changes in your sleeping pattern. This also means that this napping also takes time to get used to, because some people really have difficulty taking a nap, or it might be possible that even when you sleep for those 30 minutes, because your body is not trained to nap, you still feel lethargic and tired. So when we talk about preparation, also incorporate those naps even when you're not fasting. So for a good example, if I look at one of my toughest Ramadans, it was when I was doing my last internship in the hospital doing anesthesia, but I was married and I had a family to take care of. So I worked during the week. I worked in the hospital for 4 days. Then I had 1 day to do all my preparation for next week, and then building up all the schoolwork and such. And then in the weekend, I worked both days on my side hustle, because I got very little internship salary, like 400 euros. So I couldn't pay the bills from that. So basically, for 8 months, I worked 7 days a week. That was very tough. And also Ramadan came across, and I was doing anesthesia, high complex, high risk surgeries. It's not something that you can doze off doing. And the difficult thing with anesthesia is if everything, the good saying is, if you're good at anesthesia, you have to be lazy, because if everything goes well, you have to do very little. So it was pretty tough, because sometimes I just sit in surgery, especially when it was like microsurgery. They put off the lights because the surgeon has to look through a microscope. You're sitting in the dark, looking at the screen, and just hoping nothing goes wrong. It really took a lot of energy to stay awake and be focused and alert, because it's important. So what I did, my routine was, because I knew, okay, this time, because I fasted during internship before, I knew, okay, this is going to be very hard. So I took at least a month to slowly work into that Ramadan rhythm. And even before Ramadan, already, because I slept less during the night, because I stayed up longer, I went napping. So what I basically did, I stay awake during the time I was planning to do the same during Ramadan. And then when I got home, immediately I went to bed. So I got, because we worked started at 7 in the morning, so I was home pretty early. So at 5 o'clock, I jumped into the bed, slept for like for 90 minutes, then stayed up. I worked out, did some schoolwork, then had iftar, and then I could stay up. So the funny thing was, it was one of the hardest months of my life. But because I took it seriously and I prepared physically well, it was fine. And I remember my first Ramadan doing an internship in a similar situation. I didn't prepare because I was already heavy. I'm not going to tax myself. I saw preparation as unnecessary taxing. It actually was much harder than when I did prepare.
And then what you said at the very beginning, for example, you can stay up all night, and then you can sleep the 7 or 8 hours after Sahur. But what many people also have, for example, students, they just need to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you're just having 4 hours of sleep. How can they change their lifestyle, like change their sleep pattern?
Yeah. Well, basically, like I said, just you can do, if you start early, you can slow into it, and that's less difficult. Or you can go. It's still easier than taking it in the first week of Ramadan, but the bit harder is just going full Ramadan schedule 2 weeks before Ramadan. But make it easier for yourself because you can still drink coffee and such.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't prepare, you just have to take the take the hit in the first week. So basically that, and like I said, if with our modern lifestyle that doesn't gets adjusted during Ramadan,
Exactly.
you're going to miss out on sleep. So those naps are really important. So try to build a system, especially before Ramadan starts, for you to make it possible to sleep. And if you have children and a partner, you could also do, especially if you both work, like I said, sleep deprivation stacks. It's not like you have to regain the lost sleep. There's been a lot of science on this, so it's not something that disappears all of a sudden. You have to recover from sleep deprivation. So more sleep in deprivation is always better. So what you can also do if you have children and a family, make it decide with your partner. Okay, on Monday I'm going to take a nap, and you take care of the children. Next day I'll wake up, you take a nap, and I watch the children, because it's better. Like so many people say, I cannot take a nap because I have children. That's nonsense. Just try to work with your partner to make it happen, because it's better for you to switch than don't nap at all, but then both be sleep deprived.
So what you're actually saying is try to have naps during the afternoon, maybe just before iftar, because you will his sleep deprivation, and therefore it's very important just to have a power nap for yourself. You can divide the power nap in two different cycles. Namely, the first one is having a power nap of 30 minutes, because then you're not in deep sleep, or you can just follow the whole cycle, which takes about 90 minutes. But for example, if you're going to sleep for 1 full hour, you will probably be in deep sleep. And the problem with that is that you will decrease your performance for sure, because that is scientifically proven. Interesting.
And what's important to note is that taking a nap, napping, power napping, or sleeping during the day is something it's a skill. Your body has to get used to it. So don't be surprised, even when you follow these rules, that the first few times you take a nap, you still feel tired when you wake up. Just simply because your body needs to get used to it. So again, a good example why it's important to prepare in advance.
So you're actually saying trust the process, because maybe one person can be a bit further in the process, but the other one is starting from the very beginning. And and for that one person who is just facing this challenge, like for the first time, or maybe for the second or third, just sometimes you just need to accept the difficulties you're going to have, but try to stick to a plan. And you also need to understand that you should listen to your body. It's the same, for example, with fitness. At the very beginning, you don't know your body, so you just try to do everything. But after a couple of years, you understand your body. You know what your specific body, because everyone is unique in his or her own terms. You just know what your body would like to do. You just, okay, my body wants to achieve the specific goal, but then it need to take another route. So maybe for one person, a certain formula works, but for the other person it doesn't. Try to find your own formula, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And our body, our physical body, has magnificent capabilities of adaptation.
Yeah,
We can adapt to almost everything, even slept. Because the funny thing is, studies have shown like for like 40 to 60% of the population have chronic sleep deprivation.
So Maarten, the key takeaways from this last topic is actually try to power naps for yourself, 30 minutes or 90 minutes. Just accept the fact that you have some sleep deprivation. And for example, if you have kids, just make a plan with your spouse. And if you're just a student, try to work towards it. What you actually mean with that is, like, before the Ramadan starts, you need to prepare yourself beforehand, because otherwise you challenge yourself at the very beginning, and that's very hard. Maybe you will stick to it for like 10 days, but afterwards you will have a decrease in performance, right? Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think the nutrition part, just easy digestible meals with carbs and protein at iftar, and the opposite during suhoor, so a lot of fiber and healthy fats, also protein again. For optimal.
Maybe you can give some examples of the first one. What you can, for example, eat during iftar and eat during suhoor.
Yeah, I always found it hard and difficult because as a white man, my my culinary efforts and skills are very limited. So I couldn't. I'm not very good at giving a lot of cooking advice. What I normally eat, to make an easy example, is, for example, just white rice with chicken, maybe some beans or a little bit of vegetables, but not too much because of the fiber, and just add some sometimes a little bit of what's marinade in English? Sauce.
For marinade.
Marinate the chicken. So, but it's a little bit fat, but not that much. So you have some flavor and some. It's also not too dry. So really quite simple iftar, and then at suhoor, for example, I use a lot of vegetables, so legumes like kidney beans, broccoli, name it, with maybe brown rice or sweet potato or the funny thing is normal potato, white potatoes are also be shown to be very give a lot of satiety, so they maybe also be good even when they don't have that much fibers, but and maybe some more fat protein sources like red meats, fish, but you can also just use an egg or chicken. So it doesn't really matter, just look at the fat content and the fiber content.
Yeah, so try to have a big meal during Sahur, because then you're filled for the whole day. And during Iftar, try to have some small meals.
It doesn't necessarily have to be small or big, because small or big is really comes down on the calorie content. So do you want to maintain weight, you both have to have a pretty decent meal. But you can also, just the fact that there is fat and fiber in your meal will give you more satiety. So it is even possible, for example, if at Sahur you consume more calories, but they're all simple sugars and such, or you have a meal with less calories, but with more fat and fiber and protein, you probably have more energy and less hunger, even when you consumed less calories, because hunger is not only physiological, it's a lot of psychology and other hormones. It's too complex to go into now, but it's not so much about the volume of the meal, but more the macro breakdown of it.
Okay, and with the drinks, try to stay hydrated. For example, if you have desires, for example, to drink cola or anything else, just do it at the very beginning, but try to minimize it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, your stomach will be full of the drinks, and then you can't really eat your meal. And
in total you will have less calories in, and as a result you will, for example, lose weight.
Yeah.
And then with the second part, with exercising, you at first you say that you should listen to your own body. Maybe one person likes to train immediately after sahur, for example. Maybe one person before iftar, the other person in the afternoon. And if you want to, and for the person who doesn't train a lot or who just doesn't like it, it's very important to keep on moving. What you mean with moving is, okay, just have a wall. Just don't try to lay you in your bed for the whole day.
Yeah.
And for the person who likes exercising, you recommend that you should know instead of training 5 times a week, you can also train 2 or 3 times a week. And at the end of the month, you will have no decreasement in performance, or maybe a little bit, but you just need to accept that. And with sleeping pattern, we've already.
I think as a takeaway, also to sum it all up, especially for the athletes, because those are often the people who are actively searching for these answers as much, because they are a bit worried about their sport performance. Again, remind ourselves, even when you're a professional athlete, your body, your sport performance isn't going to get you into heaven. So
True.
Even, like I said, it's possibly fine to work out 5 times a week. It's possible, but if you know that you can minimize it, and you won't lose anything, maybe you progress less, but it means it opens up more time and energy for your worship. Maybe even when it's not necessary to tone it down because you are able, it might even be a good battle against your nafs to work out less and pay more attention to your worship. So, and that's why it's really important to be specific who I'm talking to. There are people who have to really use their discipline to work out because they don't like working out. And there's also a big group that is really passionate about working out. And the funny thing is, they always say, like, the guys who are big and muscular and they go to the gym 5 times a week, that they're disciplined. But that's not discipline. That's just a hobby. That's passion. Because the real discipline is not working out when it's not necessary, when you have better things to do. So somebody who loves working out, he's not disciplined because he works out. He is disciplined when he can lower his hobby to do stuff that's more virtuous, more praiseworthy, and more appreciated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for the lazy guy, get out of your bed. And for the sports guy, maybe take some rest.
Exactly. And what I would like to add to what you were saying, you should also trust the process. Your body needs to find its way as well. Maybe for the one, a certain formula works much better, but for the other one, it doesn't. So if we're having difficulties with it, that's normal. That's the process you're in. But you just need to keep on going to see the end result, which is like the most important of all. So I'd like to thank you very much for your insightful information. It was a very interesting conversation. I, and hopefully others as well, learned a lot. And may Allah bless you, man. Thank you very much.
Same. Thank you for the opportunity.